Man, what the hell's going on at PlayStation? Their games have been flopping left and right. They raised their hardware prices, they raised the PlayStation Plus prices, and now it's officially the end of PC ports for their single-player games. With all that, they've damn near lost $1 billion, yet somehow, their profits are at an all-time record high. Like, how does that even work? On the surface, with all those anti-consumer moves, it looks like Sony doesn't want to make money. But from the way I see it, these people are actually playing, or I guess trying to play a very calculated long-term game here. So in this video, I want to talk about what it all means, why PlayStation is locking down the fortress, why they're raising the tax, and why they don't plan to move away from live service just yet. But to understand it all better, let's first talk about Bungie, Marathon, and the fate of Destiny 2. It's no secret that the entire industry has been obsessed with live service games, and Sony is no exception. Ever since the departure of Sean Layden, the leadership at Sony has been balls to the walls with live service push, and we all know how that's been going. Back in 2022, Microsoft announced that they are going to acquire Activision Blizzard. Just a few days after that, Sony announced that they are going to buy Bungie. Now, Sony probably didn't want to get left behind in the live service race, and that's why they panicked and made that decision quickly. On paper, that looked like a very smart move since Bungie was a pretty big name and they had a lot of experience in the live service market. Sony, on the other hand, specialized in story-driven single-player cinematic games, and they didn't really have the expertise to making a successful live service game, which was made abundantly clear by Concord 2 years later. But as it turns out, acquiring Bungie was like Sony bungee jumping into an active volcano, cause that studio has done nothing but cost them more money. In fact, just a few days back over the earnings call, Sony has reported a $765 million impairment loss attributed to Bungie. According to IGN, the PlayStation owner bought Bungie, the original creator of Halo, in early 2022 in a deal valued at $3.6 billion. However, the studio has struggled financially since then, with Destiny 2 failing to do business and its new game Marathon having a hard time breaking out. As a result, Sony has admitted the acquisition has yet to pay off, resulting in these impairment charges. Sony had already reported a $204 million impairment charge as a result of Destiny 2's underperformance during the second quarter of its fiscal year, but it's now reported another $565 million impairment charge during the fourth quarter. Now, just a small thing to understand here is that these aren't necessarily cash losses, but just a devaluing asset. Like, for example, you bought a house to rent it out and just a few weeks later the roof caves in. This is something that happened with Sony. Basically, when they bought Bungie, they expected a gold mine. They expected that Bungie would make them billions of dollars in microtransactions for the ongoing Destiny 2, combined with the massive sales of a new IP. Instead, Destiny 2's player count started dropping like flies, and Marathon couldn't even take off, and this is something anyone could see coming from a mile away. The Marathon service time free beta launched to 143,000 concurrent players on Steam, and over the weekend, they had already lost 60% of their players. 60% for a free game over the weekend where games actually see an increase in their player counts. I mean, just look at Crimson Desert, a single-player $700 game that absolutely blew up over the second weekend after release, and even today it's pulling more players than Marathon every single day. The signs were already there from day one, and I'm sure everyone could see that Marathon is not going to be a hugely successful game, and despite all the shilling and all the glaring scores, that's exactly what happened. Now, before any Bungie bros get triggered, I'm not saying that Marathon's a bad game. Sure, it's not my thing and I would never play it again, but I think that gameplay-wise it's still a solid game, and I completely understand why some people love it the way they do. But the fact is, Marathon never had the potential to become a mainstream hit in the first place. We've been saying this from ages that extraction shooters, in fact, live service as a whole, is an extremely saturated marketplace. Even the biggest live service games are struggling now. Just look at Fortnite. That game is still one of the most played games today, but Epic laid off 1,000 employees because they are struggling to pay their bills. Battlefield 6 launched to 700,000 concurrent players on Steam, and now it's lost more than 90% of its player count. Arc Raiders is the undisputed champion of the extraction shooter genre, and even that game has lost around 80% of its players in just a matter of months. The thing is, Marathon launched to around 88,000 players on Steam, and I'm sure a majority of these people are the ones who tried out the game in the free beta and liked it enough to buy it. But even then, the game has lost around 80% of its player count, and at the time I checked the Steam charts, only 3,000 people were playing the game. These are not good numbers for a big AAA live service game, and if I were Sony, I would have shut this game down before it caused any more damage to the company. But Sony can't really shut it down because just a couple of years ago, Concord happened. And they can't really afford another massive failure of that magnitude. But more importantly, I think they don't want to shut it down because they are still convinced that Marathon can work. And that's why the brilliant plan Sony has come up with to somehow jumpstart Marathon is to end support for Destiny 2 and of course lay off a bunch of employees at Bungie. What actually blew my mind is that Destiny 2 saw a peak of around 71,000 players just back in December 2025. I mean, that's like 6 years after release. And it shows that Destiny 2 still has a bigger fan base than Marathon could ever dream of, so the fact that they're ending support for Destiny 2 reminds me of that meme with the drowning kid. And let's not forget that all this is happening while Horizon Hunters Gathering is in active development along with Fair Games, which is yet another extraction shooter. Now with all this, I know you must be wondering, man, why are they doing this? Why are they pushing so hard to make Marathon work when it's clearly costing them hundreds of millions of dollars? The answer is simple and it will blow your mind. Sony can easily tank these losses and keep trying because you have no idea about the safety net these guys have. Now sure, $700 million isn't exactly chicken feed, but let's look at the bigger picture here. Over the recent earnings call, Sony dropped some numbers which explains why they aren't really sweating. First, they noted how even though the PS5 hardware sales declined, they still made a lot of money thanks to the dropping yen price and more importantly, their PlayStation Store. A vast majority of their profit came directly from people buying games on the PS Store and their PS Plus subscription service. But this is where things get crazy. Even though they burned hundreds of millions of dollars with Bungie and Marathon and Destiny 2, their operating income, aka their profits, increased by 12%. Which according to them is an all-time record high. Now even though the PS5 has sold around 92 million units, back in December 2025, the monthly active users hit an all-time high of 132 million players on the PlayStation Network, which means that around 40 million people are still playing games on their good old PS4. And it doesn't really matter if they buy games on the PS4 or the PS5, Sony takes a 30% cut on every single third-party game, DLC, or microtransactions sold on the PlayStation Store. And then there's the PlayStation Plus subscription service on top of all that, which explains why they're raising the prices for it, but more on that just a bit. They also pointed out that if you ignore that Bungie loss and all the studio closures, their profits would have actually skyrocketed by a staggering 45%. The point is that the PlayStation Store and their 30% cut is such a massive cash cow that it completely swallowed the Bungie disaster and still left Sony with a ton of money. And considering how they're not all hands on deck with Marathon, one thing's for sure, the live service isn't going anywhere, and this point pretty much confirms it. Player reception to Marathon is strong, with the game receiving a Metacritic score of 82 and more than 90% of the player reviews on Steam being positive. Engagement metrics such as retention also remain at a high level. Going forward, we aim to improve the performance of the game by working to retain highly engaged core users through the introduction of additional content, further improvements in the gameplay experience, and expansion of the user base. Now, I don't know from whose ass they pulled that 90% Steam number from, because all I could find was 84%. Maybe they're just looking at the recent reviews or something, but anyhow, the main problem is that Metacritic score. And this is something I've pointed out many times. In fact, this is what I said in my last video. Now I see some people celebrating Marathon dying and thinking that Sony will probably learn their lesson after this one. No, they won't, because all these people live in a giant echo chamber. Sony is looking at the 9 Marathon got from IGN and thinking, you know what, this absolutely works. We just need to reiterate this and somehow appeal to the masses. Now, just a couple of days ago, PlayStation raised the prices for their PS Plus subscription service, once again shamelessly blaming the ongoing market conditions. I guess blaming the market conditions really does work. Please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because of the ongoing market conditions. Moving on. In certain regions, the prices for the PS Plus subscription will now start at $11 a month and $28 for 3 months. Now, a lot of people are calling it the Concord tax or the Vogue tax, and while they're not entirely wrong, I think there are 3 main reasons for this price increase. First, as I mentioned before, this is one of their biggest sources of income, and they want to capitalize on that as much as they can because they know their games are not working. I couldn't find any official numbers, but according to some estimates, the PS Plus has around 50 million subscribers, which is crazy to say the least. One more really interesting thing to note is that this price hike only affects new customers and not the current subscribers yet. So unlike Game Pass, where the price restructuring caused a massive surge of cancellations, Sony has created a sort of trap where the current subscribers are least likely to unsubscribe. Because as soon as you cancel your subscription and want to subscribe again for some reason, you'll be hit with the new updated pricing model. And this way they're locking in some of the users and preventing cancellations for a longer period of time. The second reason for the price hike right now is the new Grand Theft Auto Online that will surely drop sometime after the main game. And just like they raise the prices for their consoles, I think they're trying to prepare their customers for GTA Online as well. Sony knows that you'll be pissed off today, but by the time GTA Online drops, that anger would have faded away and the new price would become the new normal. And finally, the third reason is the competition. Since Xbox doesn't offer any real competition right now, PlayStation can get away with almost all this bullshit completely unscathed, and that's exactly why I desperately want new consoles on the market. The East has been absolutely crushing it as of late with huge, awesome, high-quality AAA games at a fraction of the development budget. Now I know, it's wishful thinking, but I really hope they take it a step further and drop their own console for like $400 that lets you play online games for free. And I'm confident they can pull it off. I mean, just look at what's happening in the broader tech space right now. China just straight up banned the import of certain Nvidia chips. They did this specifically to force their domestic tech firms to buy homegrown chips for their AI infrastructure while also boosting their own semiconductor ecosystem in the process. If they put the same focus on gaming, I'm sure they can make the lives of Xbox and PlayStation extremely difficult. And since they're already making banger games, if they go down the exclusivity route, their console exclusives would surely blow the Western games out of the water. I mean, just imagine if this new Blood Message game or Black Myth 2 is their console exclusive. Now compare that to Saros, Intergalactic, Goddess of War, or whatever else you're getting on the PS5. I know which console I'd want to buy. And honestly, this is the competition Sony needs, because right now, they're trying to weasel their way to more console sales by leveraging exclusivity. It won't work, of course, and I'll explain exactly why in just a minute, but they are trying. Just recently, the head of PlayStation, Herman Hulst, told staff that single-player story-driven games will no longer be released on PC. The only first-party games that will get a PC port are the live service games, and that's it. So if you don't own a PS5, you won't be able to play Ghost of Yotei, Saros, or the upcoming Wolverine game, which is a news that left PC gamers completely unbothered. I mean, let's be real here, who would wanna buy these games 2 to 3 years down the line? I play games on the PS5 and even I don't care about these upcoming titles. Now yes, you can argue that Wolverine is going to be a great game, but let's not forget that the same Sweet Baby Inc. that destroyed countless other games have consulted on this one too. The thing is, PlayStation brought their games to PC simply because they were chasing extra software sales. But not just that, this was also a kind of marketing strategy. They probably wanted to show the PC players that, hey, this is what you're missing out on. And while games like God of War 2018, Spider-Man 1, and The Last of Us Part 1 sold pretty damn well on Steam, the plan didn't really work that well as the sequels to the same games that sold millions upon millions on the PlayStation lagged way far behind on PC. I mean, just look at God of War Ragnarok. It barely managed to sell 1 million copies on Steam, while it sold over 15 million copies on PlayStation, which is a huge difference to say the least. Same goes for The Last of Us Part 2, and Spider-Man 2 couldn't even sell 1 million copies on Steam. The one game that did behave differently was Stellar Blade. The game sold over 3.7 million copies on the PlayStation and around 3 million copies on Steam as well. And that one exclusive that PC players loved probably won't be an exclusive anymore because Shift Up may break away from Sony and self-publish, but anyways. The point is that Sony now understands that PC gamers are a different type of audience and they're not really interested in their feminist propaganda movie games. So now they've decided to pull the plug and back away from the platform as a whole because they know even if their first party games don't work, a lot of people are still gonna buy their consoles anyway, and there are two big reasons for that. First is convenience, which is probably the most overlooked aspect of owning a console. Consoles might be expensive, but they're still significantly cheaper and much more convenient than a PC. Your average casual gamer who comes home completely exhausted after a long day of work doesn't want any hassle. What they want is to sit on a couch and just plug and play on a large TV. In fact, my friend who owns both a gaming PC and a PS5 mostly plays games on the PS5 simply because it's much more convenient. Sony knows this, and that's exactly why they're locking everything down. They know their first-party games won't sell on PC anyway, so why waste a single penny on porting them? The second reason is, of course, Grand Theft Auto 6. They're going to sell a metric ton of consoles over the next year anyway because, luckily for them, Grand Theft Auto 6 is a timed console exclusive. The FOMO around that game is gonna be absolutely apocalyptic, and make no mistake, there are millions of people just waiting for it. Right now, about 40 million people are still sitting on the old PS4, and there's a big chance that a lot of them will finally upgrade to a PS5, if not the Pro, just to play GTA 6 on launch. And even in the worst case scenario, if no one buys their hardware, the existing player base is huge, and Sony has built a damn near perfect safety net to keep milking them every chance they get. Just look at how they made RDR2 free for the PS Plus Extra and Premium members right after they raised the prices. Now I could be very wrong, but I think these guys are all set. I don't know what will happen when the PS6 drops, but for now, things are not gonna get better for us anytime soon. The only hope is that they get rid of all the nonsense plaguing the brand, like Herman Hulst for example, and bring back someone who actually understands the market, someone like Sean Layden. But I'll leave you at that. Do share your thoughts in the comments down below. What do you think? Can Sony keep pursuing their live source dream, or will they have to pump the brakes soon? Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe if you found the video valuable. Also use the hype feature so my video gets more exposure and my small channel blows up. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.